Are calories equal? Are they the same between two different foods? The short answer is technically yes, but that doesn't mean they both be absorbed the same way. I'll go into the long answer throughout this video, so if you're interested, stay tuned. Let's start out with defining what a calorie is. A calorie is the amount of energy needed to raise 1 gram of water to 1 degree Celsius. Calories are also known as kilocalories, but here in the US we call them calories. Now, how do we find out how many calories are in a specific food? Well, there's a process called the heat of combustion, in which when a fuel is being combusted and a substance begins to absorb it, that's how we find out the amount of energy. In this case, the fuel will be food, and the substance absorbing that fuel will be water. So as water absorbs the energy that is being created by the combustion of the food, its temperature increases. And as the temperature increases, we find out the caloric content of that food. Now, because all foods go through this, you'd think that calories are technically the same between different foods. Most of us know that fats contain 9 calories per gram. Carbohydrates contain 4 calories per gram, just like protein. But as I said earlier, this doesn't mean that calories are absorbed the same way. And this has something to do with the thermic effect, as well as the composition of the food. The thermic effect is a scientific term used to describe the amount of energy the body uses to digest and absorb different foods. The thermic effect varies on many factors. The thermic effect is different for each macronutrient, first of all, and it's different between individuals, depending on an individual's genetics, their activity level, and maybe even their age and if they're insulin sensitive or not. All of that comes into play with the thermic effect. But for this video, I'll talk specifically about the macronutrients and how the thermic effect affects each of them. Fat has a thermic effect ranging from 2 to 15%. Carbohydrates have a thermic effect ranging from 5 to 15%. And protein has the highest thermic effect ranging from 20 to 35%. So, if you were to consume that 100 calories of a certain fat, and the thermic effect was 5%, then technically you would be consuming 95 of those calories because the body spent 5 calories trying to digest that fat. And the same is also true for carbohydrates and protein. If you were to consume 100 calories and the thermic effect was 15% for a carbohydrate, you would be consuming 85 calories of that carbohydrate. And for protein, if the thermic effect was up to 35% and you consumed 100 calories from a protein, you would be consuming 65 calories because 35 of those calories were spent digesting the protein. Alright, so why don't I briefly explain how the thermic effect can range for each macronutrient, starting with fat. Fat is an easily digested macronutrient, and that's the main reason why the body has an easy time absorbing it. Now, the easier it is to absorb a food, the less calories your body's going to expend to digest it, which is why fat has such a low thermic effect, because it's so easy to absorb. Something else that affects the thermic effect, and this goes with all macronutrients, the more concentrated a macronutrient or a food is, the more easily absorbed it's going to be, which means that when you're eating something like, say, olive oil, which is a kind of fat which is already going to be absorbed easily, well, because this fat is in a liquid state, the body's going to have a much easier time absorbing it than, say, an avocado, which is in a solid state. Let's move on to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates' thermic effect ranges from 5 to 15%. And as I said earlier, depending on the state the macronutrient or the food is in, it's going to either increase or decrease the thermic effect. So if you were to consume a very concentrated source of carbohydrates like sugar, the thermic effect would definitely be on the lower end of the scale. Whereas if you were to consume something like a mango, for example, the thermic effect would be higher. Something else that has a role in the thermic effect would be fiber. Fiber is not always digested in the digestive tract, which means the calories from that fiber will not be absorbed. And because of that, the thermic effect increases. Now, if you were to consume something like a smoothie, the thermic effect would also be lower. But once again, because that smoothie has fiber, the thermic effect would be higher than something like sugar. Finally, we have protein with the highest thermic effect. Just like every other macronutrient, protein is also affected based upon the state that it's in. If protein is in a more concentrated state, like whey protein, or any protein powder for that matter, it's going to be a little more easily absorbed than, say, a lean piece of chicken or a lean piece of fish, in which the thermic effect would definitely be most higher. So with each of these macronutrients having a different range when it comes to the thermic effect, we can see now why even if two foods have the same calories, they may not be absorbed the same way based upon the composition of the food and the kind of macronutrient the food is. Something else I'd like to bring to attention is negative calories, which a lot of people think about whenever the thermic effect is brought up. Now, negative calories is basically a term that implies when you're consuming a food that's very low in calories, but something the body might take more energy to digest, it's going to result in negative calories. In other words, is basically a term that describes when the body uses more energy to digest a food than what's in the food. And this isn't actually supported by science. Although it does make for good advertising for certain weight loss products, it's certainly not something that is supported by science or scientifically proven. So if you're someone who wants to watch over their caloric content, just lowering your calories should work just fine. So in summary, everyone, calories are basically just the measurement of the amount of energy in foods. It doesn't tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you the composition of the food, the state of the food, the macronutrient composition, etc. It can only tell you the amount of calories in the food. Just like a piece of string and a toothpick might have the same length, that doesn't mean they're made up of the same things. And the same goes for food, which is why I believe foods are not created equal. We can say calories are created equal, but calories, once again, are just the measurement. It's the foods that count, because calories are dependent on the kind of food that you're eating. So in summary, calories are the measurement of food, but calories don't tell you the whole story. The heat of combustion is a process that allows people to see the amount of calories in a food. The thermic effect is a scientific term used to describe the amount of energy the body uses to digest a food, and it varies between a person's genetics, their activity level, and maybe their age, and maybe if they're insulin sensitive or not. But more importantly, the thermic effect also ranges between each macronutrient, with fat having the lowest, ranging from 2 to 15%, carbohydrates being in between, ranging from 5 to 15%, and protein having the highest thermic effect, ranging from 20 to 35%. Fiber also has a role in the thermic effect as well, in that when you eat a food that does contain a decent amount of fiber, or even a little bit of fiber, realize that the thermic effect will increase because not all fiber is digested, and the body will have to take more time to go around that fiber to digest the food that is actually digestible. So what matters more than anything is just to eat a healthy diet, and if you're someone who does need to watch over their caloric content, it's important to lower the amount of food you're eating and not necessarily pay attention so much to whether or not the thermic effect is high. I hope this was helpful for you guys, and hopefully this video wasn't too confusing. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section. I hope you join me in my next video. Health is the greatest wealth, not pieces of gold and silver, as Gandhi would say. And as always, take care. Bye!